Do you remember voting in class on a given topic by a show of hands, and the group with the most votes by that show of hands won? It always seemed like a fair way to take a vote and reminded people of democracy in the true sense of the word. If this is a fair way to take votes and make an election, then why do we not elect the president in this way? The Electoral College is an antiquated system in need of reform. In 2016, Hillary Clinton won the popular vote but lost in the Electoral College. It began to make people wonder if people are being represented in the true sense of the democracy that they should be. Today I will discuss the antiquated practice of the Electoral College, drawbacks of that system, and future implications for reform. Before we can get into reform, it is important to first understand how the Electoral College works. The Electoral College is a system derived from our founding fathers in the late 1700s. There was much debate over this system and how it should run. According to U.S. News, some founders wanted direct election, while others mistrusted average voters' capacity to make a fair decision on who should lead the country. According to the New York Times, it takes 270 electoral votes to win the election, and there are 538 electoral votes in all. Each state receives a number of electoral votes based on that state's population. For example, California has 55 votes, Texas with 38, and New York with 29. It begins to make people wonder, is somebody in rural Wyoming being represented in the same way that somebody in suburban San Francisco is being represented? Once the Electoral College is understood, it is important to discuss the drawbacks of the system. In two recent elections, in 2000 with Al Gore and 2016 with Hillary Clinton, the winner of the popular vote did not win the election. In recent elections, this is due to many different factors, and one of those big factors is technological advances and the growing influence of the media. This has allowed battleground states to become more important than ever. According to the Policy Studies Journal, people in safe states are being underrepresented, such as New York, California, whereas people in swing states are being overrepresented, such as Ohio and Florida. These states will typically always vote the same way, these safe states, that is. And a Republican in LA may never get their voice heard. Or similarly, a Republican in New York City may never get their voice heard in the same sense. So once the issues of the Electoral College are understood and some of the drawbacks of the system are discussed, it is important to understand how this can be reformed and the future implications of that reform. Many have advocated for the use of the popular vote. One issue with the use of this popular vote is that it would be too difficult to individually count these votes throughout the country. A direct voting system, also known as NPV, has many positive impacts and has been discussed by lawmakers throughout the country. According to HuffPost, on April 15, 2014, Governor Cuomo signed the NPV bill into law. Many candidates argued against the NPV model, saying that it would focus too much on urban centers and larger populations and not account for the people in more rural settings in more remote areas. Another idea for reform of the Electoral College is the proportional representation plan. According to Politico, instead of a candidate receiving the full number of electoral votes for a specific state, that the votes would be awarded to each candidate proportional to the number of votes that candidate received. This would allow voters that are outnumbered in a state, such as New York and California, to still have an impact on the election and still have their voice heard. Today, we discussed how the Electoral College works, some drawbacks of the system, and future implications of reform of that system. The Electoral College is an antiquated system in need of reform. In order to protect the future of democracy, we must take the value away from the swing states and try to represent this country in a more holistic approach. The way to do this, I believe, is the proportional representation plan. It makes much more sense that candidates do not have to receive each electoral vote from their state, whereas if they receive a proportion of that percentage, more people's voices can be heard. Now more than ever, the preservation of democracy is imperative, and I believe that this plan to reform would be able to do so. Thank you.